We got a list of users which we feed to users list, but it's always an empty array. And that, of course, is pretty static and doesn't lead to any users being output. Now I want to make sure that when we click that Add User button in the Add User component, we don't just log that user data here, but instead we really create a new user object with that data, and we add that to an array of users object, which we then output in the users list. And how do we do that? Well, for that we need this concept which was called lifting the state up. We need to manage our list of users in a place where we can get both access to the Add User component and, well, get notified when that Add User button was clicked, as well as where we got access to the Users List component to feed our users array into it. And we don't have access to Users List inside of Add User, for example. So managing our users list state here would be wrong, our users array. Users list component sounds like the right place because there we need that list, but there we don't get access to the added user data. That add user form is out of reach here. And actually we already configured this users list component to work differently and to get the users data from outside via props. Because that's the place where we want to manage our state. We want to manage it in the app.js component because that's the one component above both add user and users list. It's the nearest component above those two components which has access to both components. And therefore we lift the state management up to this app component. So we want to manage our users array here. And we do this with the useState hook, of course, because it's state of this app, and when that state data changes, the app should re-render. And that's exactly what useState and the state managed by it does. And therefore here we call useState instead of app, and we initialize this with an empty array. Now, as you learned, useState always returns two elements, so we can use array destructuring, and we got our, let's say, users list and a set users list function. And it's now the users list which I want to forward to the users list component. With that, it's still an empty array, but we have a function that allows us to change that array, and then that change would trigger that app component to be re-rendered, and hence the users list component would be updated as well, because it would also be re-rendered since it's part of the app component. So now the missing piece is that when we click the Add User button, and hence the Add User handler in the Add User component runs, we forward the entered username and the entered age to the app component. And we do this with props as well. You learned this as well. We can add a prop here on Add User, and we can name it however you want. For example, on Add User. And I just use this on something convention because in the end it will kind of work like an event. Now we'll handle it fully ourselves, but in the end it is like an event. When that Add User button is clicked, which ultimately happens upon a click on the button, surprise, surprise, then a function which we pass to on Add User should be triggered. It's a function we have yet to define, and we can define it here, the Add User handler here in the app component. And that's a function where I actually expect two arguments, the username and the user age. And you can name these parameters however you want, of course. I expect to get that data, and with that data, we can create a new user and add it to our list here by calling setUsersList and then updating the state. Now here, I want to update the state by taking the old list and appending a new element to it. And as you also learned earlier, when your state update relies on the previous state, you want to use an alternative form of setUsersList. You want to use that function form where you pass a function to setUsersList. And that function will automatically get the previous latest state snapshot when React performs that state update here. And therefore I'll name that priv users list, the name is up to you, and you then should return your new state snapshot in the body of this function you pass to set users list. So here I'll return an array, a new array, where I first of all copy all elements from priv users list, and that's the spread operator, which simply pulls all elements out of that array and adds them as new elements to this new array. And then I add one new element at the end. I add a new JavaScript object here, which should have a name field. Uname is the value we store there, and a age field, which stores UH as a value. So the two values we get as parameters here. And with that, we create a new JavaScript object for every user, and we add that to our users list array. And now we just need to wire this up. AddUser handler is what I pass to the onAddUser prop here on my AddUser component. And now inside of the AddUser component, we need to utilize this onAddUser prop. So here in AddUser, in the AddUser handler there, so inside of the AddUser component now, instead of console logging, I will call props.onAddUser. And I'll execute it as a function here because I know that what I get as a value on that prop will be a function. Because we're passing a pointer at AddUser handler to onAddUser, and AddUser handler is a function. So we can execute it as a function inside of the AddUser component. And now we just have to forward our two pieces of data, the entered username and the entered age, which we got stored in this AddUser component. And with that, we're forwarding that entered data to the app component upon every click on the AddUser button here inside of the AddUser component. And I know that's a lot of AddUser and user, but that's what this app is about in the end. And I want to use names you would realistically also use in real apps. So with that, this function is triggered, and if we now save everything, we should be able to enter max and add a user. Now we're getting a warning here. We'll fix this in a second, but you can tell that this generally seems to work. Now what about this warning? You should know what's causing this, and you should know how to fix it. So here's a quick second for you to pause the video and fix it on your own, and then we'll fix it together. So, do you remember what's causing this? It's a warning thrown by React, and in the end it tells us that every child in a list should have a key prop which has a unique value. React needs this to efficiently update list items and re-render them efficiently. Now we got only one list which we render in this whole application, and that's inside of the users list here, this part. We create a bunch of list items here, and that's exactly the thing that should have a key prop, because it's the item you repeat. So here we should add a key prop, and that in turn should hold a unique value. So something like G1 here is not valid because that's hard-coded, and the same for every list item that's being created. Instead, I think it makes sense that in the place where we create a user, we don't just create a user with name and age, but we also give it an ID. We give it an ID, and that could be math random toString, some pseudo-unique ID. Now every user has an ID that is roughly unique, and inside of our list, we can now utilize this ID field so that the key is set dynamically to user.id. And that ID is now unique for every user. So if we now save this and we retry this, we no longer get any warnings here because now this works as it should. And with that, we're almost done. The missing piece is that modal. Now it's something we haven't built before, but even though it might seem totally different because it's an overlay on the entire page, it's actually not too far away from what we built thus far. So definitely give it a try on your own first, and thereafter we will learn how we can build such a modal together.